and welcome to a very special evening. It's only 2 times a year we have an open house with IKYA. And why is it a special occasion? Well, IKYA's teachings are normally available only in courses or private satsangs. So tonight is an opportunity for you to directly engage and converse with IKYA, the questions that you've got. We have an amazing course starting in just a few weeks. It's the 5th collection or 5th round of IKYA Mantra. But IKYA Mantra has been around for a lot longer than 5 years. I think Maria, Elsa, some others were assisting IKYA years ago in teaching IKYA Mantra. So they've been around for a while. And the mantras themselves are as old as time, I guess, since they're vibrational. But we're super excited. It's the 5th round of IKYA Mantra, and I think the most fun part is that IKYA just keeps cranking up the volume, the intensity, the productivity, the potency, the potential, and that makes it all the more fun, because life gets pretty interesting when you really engage the mantras and use them in your life. So tonight is as much a celebration as anything else, a celebration of the continuation of this journey and these particular tools. So the sort of schedule for the evening is this little intro here, and then we'll do an Intuning meditation for those who may be new to working with IKYA. It is a meditation to try to align our consciousness and our awareness with IKYA as the teacher, and to also lift our consciousness a bit to get a bigger picture before he comes and teaches about the course. So we'll do that. Then IKYA will come in, talk about the course, discuss with you guys, answer questions, and I'll pop back at the end with some practical details and deal with the practical stuff. So that's a note. If you have practical, more like, how often are the teachings, or if I'm away or something, and can I watch them again, that kind of stuff, let's save those for the end. But the question's more about the content, what IKYA Mantra really is, and what the course does with us. That's what IKYA will address. So yes, I think that's it for me for the moment. So we're going to now just do a short meditation. So go ahead and close your eyes. And IKYA likes to work with the column of light. So I like to then remind you that you have a spinal column, your backbone, that is also a column. So see if you can't really extend and straighten up your backbone, your own column, to align with the column of light that we'll work with in this meditation. All right, breathe deeply in and out a few times with your eyes closed. You can keep your eyes closed through the whole meditation. And as you're breathing, focus on your heart. And see your heart as a ball of golden light. And when we meditate with IKYA, we really like to use our senses. So use your inner eye to really bring to life the ball of golden light that is your heart. But also sense it, listen to it, feel it, smell it even. Use all of your senses to make that ball of light really alive. And as that ball of light really comes to life, connect with the love and presence in yourself. And then use all those senses to listen to your heart as you can see the light flowing through your body. And as you breathe, gradually let this light fill your entire body and your entire self. And then really notice as you breathe, as the light flows, how you feel open, relaxed, and focused. And then use that inner eye to just observe your entire body and your entire being, being this spiritual light and this spiritual love. And then we'll practice focusing on IKYA as the teacher. So whatever image you have of IKYA, start by seeing that form, but then notice that even his physical form is made of light. And as you look at the teacher, as you focus on his face and his eyes, then you start to see beyond the physical form. And in fact, you see that his body is starting to dissolve into light. And as the form then dissolves into light, you gradually see a huge column of spiritual light. And you can immediately sense the high vibration and love of the column, and you connect with the consciousness in the column. And as you connect, you start moving towards the column of light until you move fully into the column of light. And there, all of your senses light up. The vibration and presence of IKYA all around and in you. The sense of oneness and the infinite spiritual love and wisdom. And let yourself dissolve in it. Let the column of IKYA wash through you and lift your consciousness. And feel how you are getting lighter and more focused. And see that the column of light expands and expands until there is a space of everyone taking part in this open house here at the center, online, all over the world, and also including all of the spiritual assistants who are assisting us tonight. And notice that we're all in our high frequency light form. And together we share the love, we share the wisdom, and we share the connectedness. So keep your eyes closed for just a moment and really bathe in this awareness, this consciousness. And IKYA will be with us in just a moment.
Welcome, everyone. Being human is really weird. It's such a strange life form and such a strange consciousness. And nothing really makes sense, right? The human life form and human mind is so full of contradictions. And it's at war with itself. It can contain so many different positions and storylines and does not really understand anything. And that makes it hard to grow spiritually. Most other life forms are easier in that way. They may be even more complex, but they're more streamlined. Humans are extremely messy. And part of it is as many of you are aware of, that humans are a combination of life forms from this planet combined with life forms from other planets, making it interesting but extremely messy. And you can see in your spiritual work and your spiritual journey as a human that we're pulled in different directions, right? And you have so many patterns that are the exact opposite of what you need spiritually. Because in a way, and I hear this from a lot of people, why is it that what we need the most, which is our spiritual journey, is what we resist the most? It doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't we be spiritually ambitious for real? Why is it that we are ambitious when it comes to our patterns, our ego, everything that can satisfy the self, and everything connected to spiritual growth is such a struggle because we don't want it. But that's what you get when you take a primitive life form and sprinkle it with the little DNA dust from intelligent life forms. This is what you get, right? It's fun and exciting because of that. But our journeys are not streamlined. They're extremely messy, and this is why you have chosen to incarnate into this life form, this planet, this civilization, because it makes no sense whatsoever. And that is great. It means that you have the freedom to explore. Because the more you open yourself up, the more you do indeed discover that it's so kind of discombobulated. It's not like coherent. And to lift yourself spiritually, you need to be coherent. You need to be very focused. And we are so easily distracted. We're so easily kind of drawn out into what we call the horizontal existence, which is the existence which is all of this. And I talked a little yesterday at IKYA Live about the inflammatory state that we now find ourselves in as humans. Because all humans today experience several different types of inflammation, not just physical inflammation. The thing is stress, which is an important factor in evolution. It's there to trigger mutation, meaning that when you experience any form of stress, it's telling you that your current competence, your knowledge, your programs are not consistent. They don't work. You really don't know what to do. It means you are faced with a challenge and a potential. So stress is there to make you just do stuff, come up with something new, try new things. And in physical evolution, it means that you will just do random stuff, right? And within a life form that will create so many different mutations, and maybe one will work and the rest will die. It's how it is. But often we're talking about one challenge, right? An animal, they've lived in the same area for tens of thousands of years, and all of a sudden, something happens in the environment, and the lake dries. So, then you have to find a new one. Most of them will stay because that's what you're used to, and think, well, it will rain, because it always does, and they will die, right? And then someone will be more brave and try to find the nearest puddle. It works, but they will die. You will have all these different strategies, right? And then you have the few that will find a new lake. They will survive, and they will then be the foundation of how that life form will succeed. but it's often one problem at a time. And look at your lives, people, right? It's endless. It's challenges and problems all over, all the time, without stop. Which means you genetically go crazy. So you are getting the evolutionary trigger several times every hour. So you will be in a state of systemic stress. And it doesn't help that we eat terrible food and we stuff ourselves with chemicals, right? There are several 100,000 chemicals on this planet now that did not exist 100 years ago. It's absolutely insane. That does not help. It causes deep, deep stress and inflammation in our bodies. And then our society has changed. And that causes stress because we do not have the DNA to handle this complexity. It's too much. Back in the day, a few 100,000 years ago, we related to 20 people during our whole lifespan. And now it's millions, right? Social media, entertainment in our personal lives, it's too many people. And they cause stress because you have to deal with them. And they have to deal with you. So what happens when we have this state of systemic stress is that we become inflamed. And we can relate to it when it comes to physical inflammation, right? But that's just one level. We have emotional inflammation, which is worse. And then we have mental inflammation. We have spiritual inflammation. And what that means is that the inflammatory state is simply that you are in a state of conflict, right? You have two things and you don't know how, like which one to choose or what is right. And it causes inflammation because you're experiencing that gap. So when you experience that emotionally, you will become emotionally inflamed, which means that you will see the world as conflict emotionally. You will feel that you're under attack, that you're not understood, that other people treat you badly. And you will feel a lot, and it's all negative. And you will make up a lot of stories because you will have the experience of being under attack, that things are out of balance. Because they are. And the same thing mentally. All the information you're getting increases conflict and conflict stories, and you will be an inflamed mind. And then you will start behaving from that level of inflammation, which means, as we see in the world today, more conflict, more hate. We criticize. People criticize everything now. We're being so negative, and we become more entitled because it's about my feelings and my needs, and why is nobody listening to me? Why is nobody, taking care of me, or being more considerate? Because we feel that we're under attack because of the systemic stress. And then try to find God. Good luck. It's very difficult. So your brain is in a state of inflammation. Your nervous system, your body, everything today is in a state of continuous, never-ending conflict. Right? It was so much easier back then, even a few hundred years ago, You could sit down and meditate and you would basically have a simpler life. Your conflicts were easier to understand. They were more concrete. So even in battle, you would feel calm. You would not have this sense of stress. And today we believe that this level of stress is normal. It's not. It's new. Humans have never, ever been this stressed. And it's affecting us in new ways. We have shorter attention span. It's not just because of TikTok, it's also because of stress. Because when we are in stress, we're supposed to do something different. We have to figure things out. It also means that we become more, we will be leaning towards conspiracies in different ways because that is also what's going on. There's something going on because that's part of the stress. In a calm mind, we just see the world how it is and we are happy to be in it. So, When it comes to our spiritual journeys, it's a lot more difficult today. And as I often say, beliefs will not help you. You know, and whatever you believe doesn't change anything. Because it's about you unfolding what you are spiritually and unfolding your essence. And you need to become more competent. You need to wake up. And no one will do that for you. And the old approach is as long as you submit to something, as long as you believe, as long as you hope that someone will come and rescue you, then you've done your part. But at some point, you realize that nobody's coming. And many, they wait for thousands of years. They go through lifetimes, and they do the right thing. They submit, they have the right beliefs, they have the right practices, and yet nobody comes. And at some point, we get it. It's just us facing reality, and whether or not we're able to grow into it, accept it, and find harmony that way. We will never be seen, we will never be understood, we will never be valued, because all of that is just part of the ego. We understand that the complete adjustment to what is, that is what evolution is teaching us. We've gone through lifetimes after lifetimes. You know, you start out as basic vibrations, basic elements, and simple life forms. You go through that whole evolution, not just on this planet, everywhere. And life keeps showing you the same thing. You have to adapt to reality, or you will die. It's the basics message that you've been given in every single lifetime you've ever had anywhere. It's a one-way adaptation. It's us. And the only way to achieve harmony and higher consciousness is that we transform, we change, we do something different. And then the question is, how do we kind of penetrate our own mind? Where do we start? Because when we are in this state of stress, we become more self-centered than ever. Look at the world. People are getting increasingly egotistical, increasingly self-centered. And they use their very narrow-minded, subjective points of view to then fight everybody else because they are right, you know? It's that. It's this level of stress. So how do we do it? And people find it increasingly difficult to go into spiritual practices, right? And you probably experienced this yourself if you were being honest. It is more challenging because the stress will mean that we will be all over the place. When you sit down and try to focus, you have like 20 different thoughts, 20 different emotions, so many different storylines. You're just trying to, like, how can I like manage all of this and try to find some peace and calm? And it's challenging. And I said, we need to move spiritual practices away from our self-medication strategies. You cannot use a spiritual practice to try to find calm, because it will not work. It's a way to go beyond your humanness and to open up to what you are beyond this life form, beyond this incarnation. And this is where mantras come in. They were the first type of spiritual practice that humans discovered. You know, it's just using our own voice and then figuring out something is happening. You know, it's basically, when you look at a lullaby, you know, a mother singing to her child, and how that can soothe, how that can balance, right? Or how a warrior can use his voice to make everyone, you know, engaged and energized, right? It's how you start to understand, oh, there is something here. And it is connected to vibration. from the perspective of physics, the human body is a force field of information. That we are matter and biology, that comes later, and it's, first of all, a belief system, because in reality, matter is not solid. It's still information. It's still vibration. And everything is that. Matter is basically vibration, information that is vibrating on a very low kind of frequency. If you can understand that when you have resistance to something, it means you're stopping, right, or moving more slowly. That is what a low vibration is, and thereby also a low level of consciousness. So when you are in resistance to something, your vibration will be lower and more dense. And when there's free flow, will be more high pitch, a higher vibration. This is why in spiritual work we'll always try to expand, also by lifting our consciousness, lifting our vibration. But the point is, and the trick is, to lift the vibration where we have resistance. Often what we've done, when we look at human history, is that humans have tried to just escape and thereby just lift the parts where they feel they have less resistance. And then and then you go into denial about the rest. Right? Because you just want to be in that higher state because it makes you feel better and it feels amazing. And then you disconnect from where your karma is. You disconnect from where your spiritual work is. And then, because it's so nice to be up there, you don't really want to go into it. This is something we've seen in most spiritual traditions. That is not including everything, because one gets to focus on the high vibration in itself. Now, when it comes to true spiritual work, it is more about applying a high vibration to where the vibration is low. To go in where your consciousness is basically dysfunctional, out of harmony, and try to tune it so that you can lift where you have resistance. And not just do that, but to then understand in that process, what is it that you need to change in yourself? Because this is evolution. What do you need to transform so that you naturally vibrate on a higher level? So by using a mantra, you can then vibrate differently because the vibration of that information, which is the mantra, will then do something to you, your consciousness and your body. And from that perspective, you can then start connecting with what is this area of myself with less resistance. So in a spiritual practice, you can then lift your consciousness and, oh, right, this is it. Okay, right, now I get it. And then you apply it. And then you can amplify your own spiritual work. But using mantras is so wonderful because it's letting you experience a certain vibration directly. It will do something to you, and then the distance between that potential and where you are standing in your life will then be released into your bloodstream, and into your stream of energy. It will not just be gone. That's not how it works. It never works that way, even when people hope that's what's happening, right? It's not happening. This is why people are so surprised often. They do practices and then they find themselves in the same spot all over and over again, right? Because I let go so many times and yet here it is, because you didn't do the work. It doesn't change anything except your consciousness and your understanding of how to work productively. But with mantras, you get tuned in, right? It's like tuning forks that can assist you in tuning your instrument. Because it's necessary to tune our instrument. because we get sharper. And one of the questions I often get is also why it's so important to be in a pure consciousness and all of that. Why can't it just be me and get on with it? Because in the self, we are full of resistance. Like who you are as a person is basically a cocktail made from your resistance, because that's what you're studying. The things you've figured out, they don't exist anymore because you figured that out, right? It's still like when you go to school or university, you will study something you don't know. You will not go to school to learn about something you already know. It's that simple. But when we are in our resistance, we will be in a lower consciousness, right? Because it will rotate. It will, the frequency will be lower and more dense. And then it's like, trying to cut down a tree with a blunt knife, right? You can try, you certainly can, and you can do it. It will just take a very long time. When we use mantras, we will be sharpened. So you can then cut down the tree like butter. It's all about you as a tool, as an instrument, and understanding that it's all you, and growing into that sense of responsibility, sense of opportunity, and fully getting that it's only you. It's you and your competence, you and your spiritual skills, and your exploration of reality beyond the stores of the self. So, even if you're not able to do anything, when you use a mantra, you can sing it, you can focus on it, and we do all of these things. Something will happen with your brain, with the energy in your body, and your general vibration. So you will open up. It's the most kind of direct way to build alignment in yourself, to move into center, and from there higher consciousness. From my perspective, everyone should be using mantras in their spiritual practice, no matter what it is. If it's meditation, if it's yoga, if it's like whatever it is. Because mantras are extremely direct. And you learn also about energy and vibration through it. Because when you combine the way we do it in the Course, you get a teaching around the mantra, so also you can understand it intellectually and also emotionally and personally, and understand what will happen in your life and what you're studying. When you then use the mantra, you can sort of kind of get what the vibration is. So you will then build up your own understanding of energy and vibration. So you can use that to recognize energies in general. That's also one of the things you will kind of be building through this course. So recognizing also what's going on inside of you, recognizing what type of kind of karmic topics or subjects you are studying. It's very helpful. And then you learn to apply that kind of alignment to your life. And it's not simple, right? Everyone who studied with me for a while, for the first few years, they think this is going to get easier. Yeah, right. And then after a few more years, then they say, oh, this just gets worse, doesn't it? Because I assist you in open up yourself to reality. And reality is so much bigger, so much more complex, so much more challenging than anything you could possibly imagine, because your imagination is still part of yourself. Reality is far beyond that. So when we begin to open up, you have to start relating to how the universe actually operates. And for an individual, that's very challenging. So you need to have motivation, and you need to have a sense of purpose and connectedness to what you are as a spiritual being. Because your human will struggle. which is just part of the resistance. Remember that you as a human consist of what you haven't learned yet, where you still have your resistance, and that's fine. So your human will squirm and try to get away from it. And many people have been studying with me for years. They often say they, as a human, they recognize that they just want to try to escape it. They try to get away, but they can't, because they also understand as higher consciousness that this is what I want. So you're both in this consciousness of having a stronger sense of spiritual purpose, a spiritual sense of direction, and willingness to go through whatever it takes to expand your awareness, because you begin to connect with it for real. And in your humanness, you experience the exact opposite. That in many ways, things can be more confusing, because you thought you understood how life worked, and now you understand less and less. Because all the things you can understand is basically made up. It's how a child understands the world, right? And when the child then to apply that to the real world, you will realize, I don't understand anything. It's very confusing. And this is the process. But you will get closer and closer to reality. And you will experience also major breakthroughs, but you have to practice. Having a spiritual practice every day is not only important, it's absolutely foundational. Because the teachings I give you, and you will hear it if you're new to this, when you talk to students who have been around me for a while, they will tell you that the teachings are extremely dense, very compact, like a wall of information, and then you have to try to digest and practice and bring it into your life, because that's the only way you can get it. Otherwise, it's information that's outside of you and you're not vibrating it, which means that you will feel more of that kind of spiritual stress of not adapting to a new kind of level of reality that is presented to you as a potential, right? And it doesn't happen by itself. It doesn't happen by you thinking it and wishing it and, just hoping that, oh yeah, this is nice to think about. You have to practice. And it can take years for someone to understand the level of practice it actually takes, the level of dedication. The spiritual work we do here is real. Most people who study with me, when we look at their lifetimes, they've been in the monasteries, they've been in the, they've studied the mysteries, they've been the scholars, they've been doing all of that. And they realized that it didn't work. They wanted to go past that. So most students, they have done a lot in their spiritual journey. And they've been dedicated. They've had all the disciplines, but they realized that, all right, I forgot the human part. I forgot that I have to live it. You get to a point where you begin to understand that it's not about getting away. It's about finding a way in. Because this reality also reflects God or divine truth. It's not somewhere else. The reason why we believe it's somewhere else is because this is where we are confronted with our own resistance, with our own stories, our own limitations. And then we create the story that the world is full of limitations because it's all we can see. We can see the surface of our own karma. And somewhere else, we imagine that our resistance is not there, so God must be there. It's all a fantasy. Unless you can experience the fullness of what is, or God, right here, you will not be able to experience it anywhere else. And it's growing into that potential and understanding how to do it. And slowly begin to pull this whole thing apart. Let it dissolve and have fun with it. Because this is just putty. This is just, still just information and vibration floating around. It's not as solid as we think. What is solid is our resistance, our karma. That is what makes and kind of creates the experience of everything being solid. It's our own resistance to reality. So it's important that you establish a practice to work with these mantras. Otherwise, it's like, yeah, you get all your tools sharpened, but you don't use them. And then you come back and say, well, this is not working, is it? And also, it's not the tools that you are not working. And it's that. Understanding that you need to apply, you need to study, you need to train, you need discipline. You need to have kind of spiritual ambition. And that is when you get the most out of what I teach. So, meditate every day, preferably in the morning, because it's easier that way. It's easier to start the day by aligning yourself, becoming neutral, connecting to higher reality, and then try to live from that point. Maybe it will last you an hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe longer. For more advanced students, it will last the whole day. But it's better to do that than at night, to sit down, meditate, and reflect of everything you didn't do or everything that went wrong because you were not in alignment. Right? Then you can learn a lot from that, but it's better to start the day in higher consciousness. So I strongly advise you to do that. And whatever spiritual practice you're attracted to, just do that. But be disciplined and be dedicated, because that's when these mantras will truly transform you. If also you're new to this work, the mantras that we work with are, for the most part, you call them hidden mantras. It's basically hidden because you don't give razor blades to babies. It's that. It's more for the protection of people than anything else, because these mantras are extremely powerful. So that's the reason they're not supposed to be taught to immature consciousness, because you may hurt yourself. Now, around what I teach, we have a framework. And therefore, it's safe. And also, myself and other beings are also protecting the process, so you are free to experiment with them and get results. But most of these mantras you will not find anywhere else, not in the public space anyway. So some come from, it could be Tibetan traditions, can be from, very old Indian tradition that we talk about, like, tens of thousands of years old. Some of them are not from this planet. And some of them are just being introduced to this planet. And the reason for that is, of course, that being human now is very different, as we talked about. The journeys are different. The type of atmas or souls incarnating in the human life form have changed. Right? It's one thing to look at the evolution of the human life form biologically, right? But remember also that consciousness, like souls, are being stuffed into them to have their life journeys. And it's a very different type of crowd incarnating as humans today than the type of souls incarnating like a few thousand years ago. So it also means that the mantras, the spiritual practices, everything, we're in a different place. So we need something else. And also remember that the human life form and the human culture and civilization is heading towards a very different place. Over the next couple hundred years, there will be a bigger change to the human civilization than the changes that have happened over the last 10,000 years. So it's becoming more rapid, it's accelerating, and humans will have to adapt fast to a very different type of human journey. So the mantras and practices from way back then, where people could basically sit still their whole life and reflect and then, grow a little vegetable and write a poem, we're not there anymore. So these mantras also represent where humans are heading. It's not where humans are at this point. This is why many of you will also experience the mantras as you have to stretch. These are mantras that belong to a more advanced human than the current one, right? Which is fun. But you have to stretch beyond your current human, right? And then you begin to also incarnate the potentials that are in the human life form. And you begin to kind of to vibrate also where the human civilization is moving, which means you will be in service for that and become a tool and a tuning fork for adjusting the collective consciousness on the planet as an extension of this work. And that's also fun. But you will have to work for it. It's not enough just to kind of sing the mantras. You will have to practice and study and be disciplined and understand that you will have to rebuild yourself. Over time, when you study with me, your brain will change. How you operate as a human will change, right? You will become more advanced also in your biology. And that's fun. But it does not belong to the current human and the current kind of storyline of human culture. So this is also something you need to be aware of, something that you will have to want to basically skip several generations in yourself and just like take a leap forward. So it's easier if you identify and try to, connect with where will humans be in a few hundred years from now. Then you will understand the mantras better. So try to identify with that, right? And being a spiritual explorer for real and kind of going where humans have not gone before and be part of those who will then kind of lead the way. And many of you are already aware of this, right? A lot of the students working with me, they are fully aware that they are a more kind of complex version of human. And they experience it when they walk around among these current humans and experience both the low level of consciousness and how kind of simple and primitive they are. Because they've begun to incarnate also the kind of structure of a more advanced human. So try to lift yourself to that level where a whole different set of potentials can be released in you. And for you to kind of embrace the human journey and the potentials in a whole different way. Because being human can be very different from what we are currently experiencing. So, you will definitely, when it comes to connecting with mantra, and if you have a lot of experience working with mantra, I can guarantee you that this is something you've never experienced before. It will challenge how far you've come in the expansion of consciousness. And you will really get to the highest point and the deepest point. And I'll just show you keep working. And we'll just show you, we're not impressed. You only come here. You have all this potential, work harder. Because there's infinite potential. And humans are so lazy. Right? And this is, as is a part of the human life form, it is difficult. This is why most people don't do it. They often are attracted to a type of spirituality where you can pose, where you can just be in some kind of vibe and tell people how spiritual you are, like all of that, and it's fine. We all start in our egos, but at some point we have to grow up. So when you feel and sense inside that you're ready to go beyond that kindergarten level in your own spirituality, where you want to dedicate yourself to spiritual expansion and spiritual journey for real, then welcome. You will find that no matter how far you think you've come, it's just the beginning. And it's important that you also go beyond this form. You know, it's so easy for the ego to look at this thing and then try to make up stories about it, right? Also, as we often talk about, we live in this culture where spiritual beings, they simply don't exist. That's a fact. You know, we don't relate to that as reality. And thereby, your brain will switch between this is like just this dude thinking he's full of himself, and then sometimes you connect to me as a spiritual being, and that's part of the confusion. At one point, you will be able to relax your ego, and you will allow yourself to connect to me, not through this form, but as a spiritual being. Because remember that you are a spiritual being, you're not a human. And what happens is when you allow to mirror yourself through me, you see yourself the same way. I am not something you are not, because all life is the same. The only difference is that what is in me is realized, which means there's complete consciousness of it. So when you connect with that, you can then lift yourself into a level where you can begin to accept yourself as a spiritual being. So my function is as a mirror that will always show you the next potential and always encourage you to see yourself the way you see me, because there is no difference. So the more you connect with me as a spiritual being, the easier it is for you to then correct the stories you have about yourself and who you think you are. Because the more you connect with me, the more you will start to kind of cleanse out the impurities in you and how you experience yourself through your limitations, instead of having yourself as a spiritual being as a starting point. There is no submission involved. There is no power game. There is none of that. There is no hierarchy or positioning. It's simply you utilizing my presence. And the more you peel away from how you relate to me, and the clearer and pure it gets, the more you're peeling away in yourself. And that's the process when you work with me. And again, it can be a bit of a stretch in the beginning, because in this culture, spiritual beings do not exist. Right? It's just how it is. But try to also approach me with a discipline. Try to really peel away this until there is nothing left of it. Until there's just that essence. And then you start doing the same thing in you. It's also a way for you to get more out of the mantras. By trying to purify yourself kind of quicker. what also happens with mantras in general, but especially these ones, is that if you think of a mantra like tuning you into a certain channel, like you become like a radio station. You become like the receiver, right? And when you're tuned in, then the information can start flowing through because you are then in a position of receiving. So every type of mantra will tune it into a certain kind of station. So with these mantras, you will be tuned in higher and into the deeper mysteries, but also what it means to be a spiritual grown-up. We focus a lot on service and what that means. Because ultimately, that is the goal. I always say it doesn't matter what spiritual path you're on, at some point it turns into service. It's the moment you realize that it's never about you. And it was never about you. Until that point, it's all about you. Because you want to heal. You want this, you want that, you want to be better, and you have all these problems, all these imbalances, right? At some point, you have cleansed so much. Yet you start seeing that it's not about you at all. It's only about how much you're able to give back to life, how much you're able to give back to the universe and be a vehicle in co-creation. We will be talking extensively about this, but just understand that this is a foundational principle in what we study. And a lot of the mantras will assist you in becoming a better vehicle, to be able to be in service more directly and understand what it is, and also to move past the ego state in service, right? As I said, we all start with the ego, like, look at me, I'm spiritual, look at everything I do, you know, all of that. When it comes to service, everybody starts there. But through these mantras, through these teachings, you will be able to move through that faster. And you will allow your ego to be where it is, because you will gradually grow out of it. You will have less identity connected to your ego, so you can just let it do whatever, because it's not who you are. So you'll find that you can exist in a wide spectrum of different kind of spaces and levels in yourself. And you can choose where you want to go. And it's more fun. So you will open yourself up to all the different kind of variations in what you are as a being, and how you can utilize yourself in your journey more intelligently. And it's back to, why should we do this at all? You don't have to. You can just follow normal biological evolution, and that will also unfold you spiritually, but it takes a very long time. When you look at biological evolution, and you see how much time it takes for a life form to transform from like one type of being to another being, it takes some time, right? We're not talking weeks here. It can be millions of years. And yes, so it is with our spiritual evolution. When that is connected to the biological evolution, it's mostly repetition. And then small changes based on how you adapt to your environment through your physical form. With spiritual work, everything changes. You can learn to work with your karma without even having to go through physical manifestations. You can learn to work with things directly, so you can accelerate your growth and your healing in your capacity to love and be in service far beyond the potentials of your human journey. When we become a little more kind of ambitious spiritually, we look at our human journey and we say, well, I can do better than that, right? Because we understand as spiritual beings that there is potential for more. But then I can't just sit on the bus, being a human, just living my normal human life and think that that will bring me anywhere. I have to be more proactive. I have to figure out how to do this. And normally when we begin the spiritual awakening is because we already know this inside. We have been kind of triggered into this kind of yearning. We want more, and we know that we are capable of so much more, and we have to figure it out. Right? And that's when the spiritual journey truly starts. But then we need to learn how to do it. Again, every life form, every culture, every kind of timeline and place in the timeline, in the culture, it's all different, right? So the tools that are being introduced to this planet right now belongs to this part of the journey. Like, you know, a few thousand years from now, there will be very different tools because the consciousness will be different. But what I give you, no matter what I teach, are power tools. They work. And they are extremely sharp. And you can get professional results, but only if you learn to become a professional in how you approach your spiritual journey. And this is also why studying with me is hard. Because this is the kind of elite level of spiritual studies. What I do in many ways is an experiment, because normally when I teach in a forum, it's not in public. It will be in confined, protected spaces. Also again, because normally you need to have an established, extremely kind of driven level of dedication to deal with it. So teaching what I do and making it available. And before I went into this forum, we had some discussions around it, because it's like, let's see what happens, because for many humans, what I teach is completely, Sometimes I say that I spend most of my time teaching, talking to the wall or into thin air, because, if you can grasp 1% of what I teach, I'm very happy with that. There is potential for 100% though, right? And it's also interesting for me to see how much can we stretch someone in the human form. And you will be stretched. But you will need that discipline. Then it's fun. And you will feel over time that you do become more competent. You begin to understand more of your journey, what life has to offer and how to master it. Not just make all the bad things stop, because that's often where we start. You begin to understand, there's complete order. Everything is completely logical. Everything is mathematical. I can interact with it. I can co-create with it. I can change it. I can express myself through it. Life is no longer something that is happening to you. You will have a conscious awareness of you creating it. And then you'll learn how to do it. And it becomes more and more fun, because you take over in more and more spaces in your existence. You can see that it's working. And you can see how life is communicating with you and encouraging you. And you become a kind of spiritual literate in a way that you begin to understand the communication of life. And you can use it, and you can have fun with it, and you can be creative. Mantras will assist you to cut through all the fog and the noise of the self, no matter where you are, no matter what your practice or your level of consciousness. It doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what you think of yourself and what models you have. It doesn't matter. It's simply vibrational information. And often when you look at it, it's a combination of, sounds. How can that do anything? It's often not just that. It's what it's connected to. Just think of yourself, how you respond to certain concepts, right? When you think of the kind of word family, immediately you get a sense of, it can be love, it can also be hate, it can be conflicts, it can be like support, it can be many things. For many, even like a concept like Christmas, when you say that word, you immediately begin to produce chemicals, right? Or chocolate, right? Or sex, or anything, any concept that you connect with and that you already know what is, right? Okay, so when we have mantras that have been used for a very long time with the same purpose, and those individuals are now very advanced, it means that those beings become part of the space you connect to through the mantra. So they become part of what vibrates through you when you sing it. Because when a vibration in a kind of like sound symbol in a way is established for that, it's not just the vibration itself, but it will open a certain door into a space that has then been established. And from that space, beings will then also connect to you and assist you. And this is also part of the fun, working with these mantras. That, especially now with the kind of last cycle, I think most of the students taking part in it could feel that, yeah, things are starting to happen, right? It's a new level. We're being stretched and stressed, but things are definitely happening, and it's like more is opening up, and it's kind of wild. So that's what you will be a part of. It's that exploration of yourself in reality through vibration and information, and you will get to understand so much more about yourself and about what reality is and how to have fun with it, right? As just growing out of the illusion that life is happening to you, right? Because we see it as chaos. And chaos simply means that you're not in tune with it. Nature is always in order, is always in balance. But when you can't see it because you are in a consciousness too low, it will seem like chaos to you. When you lift your consciousness to be on par with what's happening, you're able to navigate. When you lift your consciousness even further, you can see the premise and the kind of the laws of nature in expression that then turns into manifestation. You get to a level of insight and logic that you can never do from a human perspective. And that's also, to me, when I see someone kind of reach that level and they start to observe beyond order, beyond being able to navigate, but when they're able to start observing the premise of existence and see how everything plays out and why, they can see the math, they can see in a way the algorithms. That's when we can start having more intricate discussions, because it's on that level that life is truly interesting. And it's also on that level you can interact with your own karma without having to go through manifestation. Because you get it. You can recognize imbalances in vibration directly, and you can do something with it directly. Instead of having to go through a cycle of first manifesting based on your resistance, then interacting with it, then all the screaming and yelling and blaming and fighting and all of that until you lose, and then you gradually understand, I need to heal myself, and then you go through that, and then you give it up, and then you change, like all of that, right? You can just skip it and go directly to the adjustment part. You know? And sometimes people try to tell me that they don't have time for spiritual work, they don't have time for spiritual practice. I say it's the same thing as if a musician said, I can't tune my instrument because I'm too busy playing. And my answer would be like, yeah, but you're out of tune all the time. It's painful to listen to. It's just rubbish because you're not in tune. Right? Any musician knows that it starts with tuning your instrument first and then you play. Because if you're not in tune, everything sounds terrible no matter what you play. You may have the perfect technique, doesn't matter. You will be out of tune with everything, and everyone will find it painful. We need to tune ourselves first, right? Then you're in harmony. It's that simple. So building that stamina, building solid practices, building the discipline, building the kind of study of life, and building your competence and your skills and your consciousness to a level where you start to get it for real. That's what we're doing here. So, how to work with mantras in general, if you're new to it. You can apply it to any type of practice. You can sing it out loud. You can also sing it inside. Some mantras are more meant to be used as kind of thoughts, or that you recite them silently in you. You can also just use a mantra and then just listen. So often one will have a combination of first singing or reciting and then listen, just to see what's happening in me now. Like in what way am I being tuned? And this, see what kind of flow is coming through now. You can use it in dynamic meditation and singing and kind of moving, and just see what comes through. How does my body respond to this vibration? Repeating it in your mind, think about it throughout the day, and try to work with it as much as you can, and just let it be there. And try to then, when you recognize the vibration, just try to feel it the entire day. You can also use the mantra as a filter and see what comes through. What kind of thoughts do I get? What kind of ideas? What is actually happening in me? What is transforming through this mantra? And also in the course, work with the teachings. We advise that you listen to the sound files as much as you possibly can, because it contains the information of what the mantra is. And it means when you work with that and study it, don't just listen to it while vacuuming. Try to also be focused and study and go into it and reflect. What is actually being taught? What does it mean? How can I apply this? That will also assist you in your transformation. And also, you can sit, you can lay down, you can walk, you can do whatever, but explore and see what works for you. Different positions will have a different effect. Because, of course, it's very different to be out walking than sitting, right? And just explore, what does that actually mean? How am I connecting to this in different ways by being in my body in varieties of kind of settings and ways of being. And what you will experience over time is less resistance. Less resistance does not mean that your problems go away. It means that they will increase. Right? And why? It's just like in school. Right? Once you're able to do the easy math tests, guess what? You get harder ones, because it's an education. It's not about not doing anything. That's a human laziness. You're here to build skills, to build your competence in being in life. Just like in school, the moment you're done with one task, here's a more complex one, because it's about stretching. It's about, oh, I've worked hard, now I need to rest. You're in school. This planet is a school. You're here as a student. And because nobody wants to study, look at our civilization. It's all about, not studying. Everybody's staying home from school, watching TV, eating candy. That's basically our civilization. And then look what happens. Because we need life skills, we need spiritual skills to be able to deal with ourselves and the planet and everything. And when everybody skips school, it doesn't work out too well. we need to study. So this is why when you study with me, the frustrating part for your ego is that it keeps getting harder. Because we think, well, I'm more advanced, it should be easier. With more flow, more manifestation, more opportunities, often it will be larger scale as well. Because you will need to test yourself. And if you actually understand it, you will have to also test, can you assist other people? If you've understood something, then of course nature wants you to replicate that in other people. That's how nature works. When you have understood something, it's not for you. Because you're already vibrating it, then the job is how many individuals can you transfer this to and plant the seeds? Right? So there will be a higher expectation of you actually trying to affect other people, to lift the world around you and make a difference for real. And it's always that. When you've done with something, you say, okay, well, you've gotten it. Okay, you understand it now. Next level. I don't like to waste your time. And that's why we keep stuffing things into your lives, right? Because you're here in this lifetime and you're not a passenger. Although you want to be in your ego, you definitely want to be, but you're not. You're the driver. Right? And it's waking up to that, and, really embracing it and wanting to always stretch, always go farther. But this is part of what you will experience. So it's not to give you problems. It's to give you opportunities to grow by using and utilizing what you've learned so far. And then there will always be a part that you haven't figured out yet. When you look at how kids are taught in school, it's how it is. When a kid has learned something, well, he will use that in the next assignment. But then there's a part that he needs to figure out in addition. This planet is a school. And this is class. But what we do is utilize your life also as a training space. And it's concrete. I will often go in directly into your life and make adjustments and move things around to make them more interesting for you to learn. Because often, again, your life will be the default setting, right? And when you grow, you have potential to go beyond the default setting, and then it's often more productive to move things around slightly. So the most interesting thing really about studying with me is that your lifetime will be different because of it. So often when we start moving things around, your whole incarnation will be lifted. So that how things play out will then be on a different level, and new pathways will be established with, in a way, new plots and new storylines that wouldn't be there from the start. Because now you are to kind of use the skills and the consciousness, everything that you're learning, and apply it. And sometimes it means that, yeah, you need a more advanced setting for that. So everybody experienced that. When they study with me over time, their whole lifetime will change, become more advanced, more kind of challenging, but in the way that you also increase your consciousness and your skill set, and you begin to behave as a more advanced human. It doesn't happen overnight, but just be prepared that this is, in a way, the most important thing about working with me when it comes to you as a human. Your lifetime will over time change into something else. And it means that it's more streamlined to release your, not necessarily full potential, but definitely more potentials than you would on your own. And sometimes people can notice it like very concretely, that they can see that there will be kind of upgrades. It's like a TV show where there's a new season, right? And they've like done stuff to the set because they had more money this season. Like it's that. It's still the same show, and yet they have better haircuts, and you know, it's that, right? So you will experience that too over time. Not necessarily better haircut, but your life will be more streamlined for spiritual studies, which makes it even easier for you to be in that dialogue and for you to test out what you're being taught. So there will be a direct correlation between what I teach and what's happening in your life. So you can practice what I teach directly. But then you have to practice, right? You have to actually do it and not just think about it. And that is also what is difficult for the human mind and the human ego, right? Because we just want to relax, and we just want things to work. And I make nothing work. So that you can make it work, right? Because it's how you learn. How can you learn to become a car mechanic if the car is always working, right? I will make it not work in such a way that you have to pull it apart to find what's wrong, and then you have to pull it, like, you know, put it back together again. And then it's something else, right? So you learn to basically pick apart your entire self, your entire lifetime, and put it back together, and through that you understand the mechanisms of existence. Not just in yourself, but in life. Right? So this whole study program is much more comprehensive than just singing a few mantras. Right? You enter a type of study that is transforming on so many levels. And it can take some time to get into it, but it's fun. And it's real. And the goal is always for you to be free and to, again, as we talked about, how you can then use what you've learned and make it work in other people. Well, that's what I'm doing too, right? It's always fun to see when you understand how the universe works. Can you make other people understand it too? Can you make them actually utilize it and make it work, right? So then it's about you becoming as independent as possible, as strong as possible, to find harmony, to be able to play your instrument, to be co-creative, and to gradually grow into the full awareness of who you are as a spiritual being. And that's what we're doing. So it's not about following me. So like, that's the stupidest fucking thing you can do. If you follow someone, you're not walking your path, right? So just following me means that you're not dedicated to awakening, because it's only when you're in a sleeping state, when you're in low consciousness, that you will follow anyone. Spiritual awakening is about not doing that and waking up to what and who you are spiritually, and discover what your own kind of evolution is, and then be dedicated to that. But at the same time, we can do that together, right? And that is also what we're building as a community, is that where everyone can walk their own path. But it doesn't mean that we have to be in a vacuum. It doesn't mean that we have to do it by ourselves, or that we have to do it alone. In principle, we go through so many of the same things. And we can exchange, you know, tips and, you know, whatever we have figured out that works. And we can empower each other in that process of awakening, so we become strong and independent. But as I say, even when we are independent and strong, we don't have to be by ourselves. So So we're building a community of spiritual explorers, of spiritual beings that are in the process of unfoldment, and that we do everything we can for each other for that to happen. And where you can all use me as a mirror for that, for that process, but you're not to copy me. Because when you use me as a mirror, you will see yourself. You will see yourself through what I am, in principle. So you can go through the same type of process of awakening, but in your own unique way. This is also why I teach in principles. I hardly ever tell stories unless there's a fun point to it. But for the most part, I try to keep it in principle, because principle can be applied to any journey. It's like a law of nature. Gravity works the same way for all of you. So it is with all types of spiritual laws and spiritual principles. They can be applied. So I assist you in kind of breaking down spiritual principles and then understand how they work in your life and how you can kind of work with them and how to apply kind of universal spiritual information. This is also why I say I never teach dogma. I'm not interested in any of the religious part, any of the traditions, because there's too much cultural mumbo jumbo around it. I try to peel away all of that so that you can get principles you can test out in your own life. You can see if it works. That's empowering. And when you figure out something in your own path, that belongs to you. Right? So we all try to keep the communication on a principle level, and therefore not to talk about our emotions and our stories and like all of that, because that belongs to the self. And it cannot really be applied by anyone else than you. It's more interesting to see when you've gone through a process, what have you learned? Are you able to extract it in such a way that you have a principle, that there is something about the universe that you've learned beyond the self? That can be transferred. Right? So we try to stay away from like the personal kind of stories when it comes to like our suffering, our resistance, our emotions, all of that. But we can share our journeys, like how we do things, the experiments we do, what we reach in ourselves, and everything we go through in order to figure something out. That's the kind of the focus of the sharing. It's more productive that way, and also when we all try then to be true to our own path and to discover what that is. We always need to try to remove the personal part because it's not something other people can use. And it also represents a great discipline, right? Because it means that you're not contaminating other people's journey with your ego stuff. And you can then in your mind also observe your ego stuff and say, well, that's garbage, right? Let's focus on what will actually promote growth and healing, right? So everybody is kind of working together in order to make this kind of work and to build a community that's based on a more advanced approach to spirituality. Again, representing where humans will be a few hundred years from now. So I think what we can do is just also try a mantra that we can sing together. And we will go for one of the old classics because this is an open space. It's a mantra called HU. It's written H-U. It's a mantra you will find in many traditions. And it's pronounced HU. And we sing it. And you sing it in whatever way you want. And normally when we sing it, it's like we start and stop in different places, so it's one continuous sound. We don't have to sing the same note. You can sing higher, lower, whatever, you know, we're trying to be in harmony. So first, close your eyes and breathe a few times and try to find your center. Just connect to the center of your being. Now also focus on your heart, your spiritual heart. which is the center in the body of divine love. The spiritual heart goes beyond the self and self-interest. There's a space of giving and allowing and acceptance. You try to see your spiritual heart as a ball of golden light. Also connect with a warmth, the gentle light and energy in your heart. And with this mantra, we focus on love. We focus on letting love flow through us and allow ourselves to become instruments of divine love. So we sing Hugh in a long note, obviously. So I'll start, and you can just follow it whatever way you want. Hugh. Now quietly listen through your heart. Just focus on a gentle love flowing through. Focus on connecting with everyone here through love. Now, inwardly, seeing you as an expression of love, and try to channel love through your singing, but do it silently. Focus on your heart expanding. Let your entire presence, your body, become this light and this love. You may open your eyes. Now we'll open for questions, if anyone's got any.
In a fun synchronicity, we have a baby with us in the audience for the first time in a long time, and our first question from Martina in Germany is actually, to what extent are mantra also useful for children, and do you have any age recommendations?
Time does not exist, age does not exist. The form we're in is still a force field of information. So any expression of life will benefit from vibration, and the vibration of mantras. So remember that even though we come into new bodies, it doesn't mean that we are newbies. Right? We're still spiritual beings in unfoldment. So my answer, like everybody, anytime, everywhere.
Okay, and then we had one question online as well about, is there a security system or code word if the mantra activates manifestations that could be, in her words, too much, seen from a human perspective with no family or friends to help? Are there programmed safety files, like we won't get any more than we or the environment can take in any given situation?
Now, when you study with me, you will automatically be protected against yourself. Because think of also that studying with me is a space. And it means that within that space, things work differently. And the point here is to educate you, which means that it is safe. Because the point is to bring you to a higher level of consciousness and to educate you not to make life difficult. is to give you challenges that you then can solve. So it's also part of your journey to then understand what is productive and not. And sometimes, as spiritual students, we can still do stupid things. It doesn't mean that it's dangerous, but it means that we can also learn from creating imbalances in ourselves and others. But studying with me is a very protected process, and there are also many spiritual beings assisting and being part of this. So, and we all have and we all share the same intention, and that is to educate you spiritually. So we will not give anyone anything they can't handle. But sometimes, part of learning is also learning to have respect. In the old days, you would give kids knives, because as they grow up, they would have to handle even more dangerous things. So it would be better that they had like a small knife and that they cut themselves, because then they would learn. So the protection is not always protecting you from harm and self-harm, but we will assist you so that you will get it in the right amount. But growing up also means that we understand where the balance point is, and we have to respect the reality of what we're dealing with. And sometimes it's therefore helpful to also be in imbalance and to experience what a lack of awareness and presence and respect will actually do, because that's necessary in order to also use sharper tools. So that's also part of it. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you could hold that childs of any age could benefit from this. Would you be able to hold space for a baby?
There's no difference between babies and other versions of humans. It's the same thing.
So a baby could attend this course?
I'm not sure that a baby would benefit from, because the brain is not developed to the level where it can understand what I'm saying, or a baby cannot necessarily sing the mantras. I would think it's more for the parents to include the baby in the energy, and when you practice the mantras, to do it with the baby, right? Because then the baby will still kind of marinate in that energy, in that space, and that's often the best way to do it. Now, kids are different. Some kids that are very spiritually aware, they may start kind of spiritual disciplines between the age of 2 and 3. But it depends on the consciousness and how much experience that individual has before coming into this lifetime. But I've met a lot of children that are definitely more advanced than their parents, are more aware, and are fully capable of handling very direct practices. So it all depends on the individual. But I think when we're talking about an infant, it's better to just let the baby be kind of part of it.
I have a follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
So you say between the age of 2 to 3 is when they're able to sort of sing with. And you say that just singing the mantra to them sort of give them the same benefit?
Yes. It's like kids, they tune into their parents. It's how they survive. So they will still be part of the parents' kind of energetic system, normally till the age of 3. It's when also, around the age of 3, it's not a date because everyone's different, but what happens also with the first kind of surge of hormones, like it's when the kid will start saying no a lot and throwing tantrums, right? That's part of the first separation. where the child is then discovering themselves as an individual, right? So then there will be established more of an independency energetically, but in that, the first 2 to 3 years, normally they're part of the parent's energy. So it's very kind of simple, but I said, like, even for kids, like if they're skilled, they will figure out how to meditate by themselves. I met many kids who started practicing kind of the lotus position before they could walk, because that's what they knew, right? It depends on who they are when they incarnate.
All right. So if I understand you correctly, a child below 3 years, then you would recommend bringing them to your classes as a bystander with their parents to sort of
They
feel their
can do
energies.
that, yes, absolutely. Or, you know, again, most of the study is done at home. Again, you will be listening to the audio. You will be practicing, so the child can be part of that. Doesn't not necessarily have to come here, but it's in your practice of what's being taught, that space, which is the most important one. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Mm-hmm.
Is there any questions out there?
Yeah, here.
I have a question about control. As you're saying that you need to drive and be in a driver's seat in life, but at the same time, through being in some sort of elevated state of consciousness, I experienced that there's no point to control at all, right? Because it's clearly there's no point for that. So how do you drive without control? That would be my question.
Now, normally when you drive, it's better to drive on the road. So it's the ability to adapt to reality faster, right? I often talk about this as the surfer. When you want to learn how to surf, and you start often with a control thing, and it will fall off immediately because you can't be in control. What happens over time is that you realize that, oh, it starts with the wave. And the information from the wave will then move through the board, and then your muscles will respond instinctively with hundreds of adjustments per second. And your brain is the last one to know. It's the opposite of control. It's a state of balance, but connected to your surroundings so that you're able to adjust real time. That is what gives you freedom. Then you can have fun surfing, but you also know you're not the one in control. Right? So it's that balance point we're talking about here. The concept of control is, I want to do this my way, and it never works. It's like we're always like the surfer, but it can take time for us to understand that you're not even close to the board anymore. Right? It takes moving into that space and kind of learning how to be in a state of complete surrender, and yet let nature work through you, and to listen, but you're still the one driving the car. Right? And this is the interesting thing about spiritual work, because yes, the first part, this is what most traditions focused on, is how to let go of all of that, because one understood that when we're in the ego state, we just disconnect from reality. The more I want, the more I'm in all of my stuff, I cannot be in harmony by default, so I have to let go of all of that. So the goal was always to get to that state where you've let go of everything. And then you have great insights. But then what? In most traditions, that was the end goal. And you end up being completely dysfunctional. Because how can that be used for anything? You're just like laying there, doing nothing, contributing with nothing, creating nothing. How can the universe expand? When you look at everything you associate with spiritual beings, they're not like that. Mastering something means that you have gone beyond control and the ego, and that's how you become masterful at what you do. So most traditions, they skip that part because that's the difficult one. Transcendence is the easy part. It's incarnating transcendence. That's what mastery is. And that's the surfer. It's being able to adapt to nature real time, and then using that to express yourself. Right? So that's more productive. And that's what everyone here is trying to figure out. And as a model, in essence, it's easy to understand, but it's really difficult to achieve. Because we have to achieve it in everything. So if you think of everything you do during a day, different sports, right? It's not just surfing, it's in everything. And finding the same balancing point in the same way to adapt real time and let nature work through you in everything you do. From getting out of bed, going to the bathroom, making breakfast, eating this or that, like everything. That's why it's difficult. It's so much easier to just let go of everything and just be in a state of happy disconnectedness, where you can see everything from above, but not being able to interact with it. And then you think, I'm free. The thing is, you're not. And so the point is to lift your consciousness where your consciousness is at its lowest, where you have the strongest resistance, because that's what's keeping you back. True spiritual growth demands that it's all of you, everything you are, down to the last particle. Everything will have to be lifted. It's how you do it. And we try to do it kind of piece by piece, a little bit here, a little bit there, but over time, then we gain an understanding that, oh, right, I'm all of this. I have to lift all of it. I have to transform all of it, not just the parts that I think is more spiritual, right? So it's a huge undertaking, and it's a huge process. And this is why we take all the time in the universe and then some. Like, we go through billions of lifetimes. It's so complex, it's so big, that it's, again, beyond human imagination and understanding, because there's so many different ways we can incarnate. We don't always incarnate in life forms like this. We can incarnate as structures. We can incarnate as group consciousness. You can incarnate as also principles, as multidimensional forms. There are so many different ways. A thought is an incarnation. An attitude is an incarnation. When you attach yourself to things, they become extensions of your incarnation, thereby also becoming bodies. Incarnation is whenever you as consciousness attach yourself to something in order to experience it through it. That can be absolutely anything. So there's no limit to how we incarnate. And we need to master every single variation, which means it's not about transcendence, it's being able to master it. So this is also why studying with me is more challenging, because that's where we're heading.
Okay, David in California wonders if his 9-year-old can practice with him, or would he benefit more from, participating in the course himself fully and in parallel?
Well, I think when it comes to everything connected to our spiritual growth, we have to understand that we are all on separate individual paths. So it's important also when it comes to spiritual practices and also family involvement, that we're able to have two clear thoughts, that we can study together, we can be in that together. But we also need to encourage the awakening of the individual path. Right? I think for kids, that is extremely beneficial, right? Because the world they are growing up in is a new one. And a lot of the old stuff is just, it's gone. It's not interesting. So to assist kids in becoming aware for real and understand the opportunities and potentials of being human on this planet, I think that's wonderful. And kids can absorb what they can. Remember, like spiritually, they're more advanced than the body they're in, right? So often kids will have a limited capacity when it comes to the intellectual understanding, but often they're more open when it comes to connecting. So I think it's up to each family to decide how they want to be involved with spiritual work and spiritual practices, but I think in your case, I think it would be beneficial for both of you. Yes.
Xavier asks an interesting question. Will you teach all spiritual principles in the mantra course or just a part of it?
That's an interesting question. Because it's like, will I show you everything on the internet, right? It's understanding that existence is so vast. You know, as I often say, when it comes to the physical universe, just with the Hubble telescope and what they've understood is that the universe is about 26 billion light years wide. And there are trillions of galaxies. When you think of the Milky Way, that's one, and there are trillions of them, each containing trillions of planets and all that. It's so big. And then there are almost infinite numbers of dimensions. Existence is so vast, and each type of dimension and place will carry a different combination of natural laws, because when we incarnate into a certain space, because that space will carry a certain range, a certain octave, then containing specific spiritual principles and natural laws that will kind of specialize the spiritual studies. So when you're working on a specific type of karma, then you incarnate into that dimension, and then based on that, you will also choose the galaxy, and then the area of the galaxy, and then the type of planet, and then the life form, and so on. It's extremely specialized. So the spiritual principles that I teach are, for the most part, also relevant for the journey of those incarnating on this planet. There's no point in me talking about things that you could never understand as a human and that you could never use for anything. There's absolutely no point. So if you think of the equator and how big it is, let's say that I will teach 0.1 millimeter. And that's still light years more than you're able to absorb. But the wonderful thing about principles as well is that you can unpack them, because you will only be able to relate to a spiritual principle based on your consciousness. And I teach on many different levels at the same time. This is also something that in the beginning can be a little bit confusing. But I will explain how it works. First, it is that as you grow, you can listen to an audio file that you've listened to 100 times, and all of a sudden it sounds different, because it will. If you can understand that every frequency, every vibration, and a combination of vibration will in reality be a separate dimension. So think of chords on a piano. You have a certain amount of keys. How many combinations can you make? Right? So every combination will then be a separate chord, and a chord is a dimension. Since I'm able to exist in consciousness beyond this. I'm not limited by form. I'm able to sit here and speak and express in several dimensions at the same time, which means that as you grow, you will hear something else. This also means that the people who are here will actually hear me speak different words. And it can be complete mindfuck, but this is what we're talking about. Reality is so vast. And it's also when you study spiritual principle, you will be doing it from your own level of consciousness. And as you grow, you will understand more of that principle because you see how it operates, and then you grow even more, and then you discover something else. This is also why I focus on principles. It's not limited to your level of consciousness. The only thing that is limited by it is your own understanding, which means you can go back to the same principles over and over and over again for millions of years, and you will discover something new each time. This is also what makes it fun and interesting.
Arjan in the Netherlands, he's studying both IKYA Aligned Crystal Healing and IKYA Mantra in parallel, and finds that mantra can occasionally fall by the wayside, so he wonders how we might most effectively be able to study both courses together.
Oh, well, number one, they're quite synchronized. So they are in harmony with each other, which means they amplify each other. So the mantra will also be connected to the crystal teaching. So it means that you can use also the mantra with the crystal, and you will get a different approach because they will contain some of the same principles. But mantra will always activate you, right? You are the instrument. You are the one being tuned. So mantras are, for me, quite foundational. And it's important that when you study both, that you do practice with both and not see mantra as like something extra. There are extremely kind of direct and kind of surgical tools in tuning you. And that will also enable you to engage with the crystals even more.
Two things. One, this is my 5th year now working with these mantras, and it continues to blow my mind. I mean, the last mantra we worked on I thought was, how could it get any better? And then the one we're working on right now is totally blowing my mind. So it's really interesting. I never would have believed that it could have that kind of a progression and continue. The other thing is it's really lovely that there's so much talk today about children and family. It's lovely to hear that. But I also know that you've talked previously about not sharing these mantras. I'd love to hear you say something about that.
Yes. When it comes to everything I teach, because they belong to a level of consciousness that you are not in. It means that when you're in the space I offer, it means that you can interact with it and study without becoming imbalanced. Sometimes you need that experience of becoming imbalanced, but the thing is when you then share the information, share it with people who are not in that space, they may experience more imbalance because often they will be in the intention of the ego. Why else would they not have the patience to approach it themselves, right? They just want to, and it's that it comes from the ego, and often then it will not be beneficial, right? So instead of, oh, I just want to share this, it's not smart. Back to each individual needing to take responsibility for their own journey and their own awakening. It means then you do it in a productive way. And you learn how to do it because you need the framework, right? Also, when you study with other people, you experience more of that kind of support and that nurturing, and it's easier for you to digest. When someone's outside of that space, it's not necessarily beneficial, and they won't necessarily understand it. They will often be in the ego intention, and that will not be good. So it's not, ooh, this is so special, it should be a secret. It's more about what is productive, right? And also respect what you're being taught. This is not for beginners. And it's also for you to kind of be in a space where you can lift yourself up and to accelerate your own growth and your own expansion. Understand that belongs to those who are actually in that space. And to never feel tempted to like, look what I've got. Because our spiritual journey and awakening is a very kind of individual thing, right? So it's also respecting where other people are at. So I'd rather than share with them that you are in this type of spiritual education and try to inspire them to look into it for themselves instead. Because I think the framework around it is so important. Especially now also that we're really putting emphasis on building more of that support structure and community and all of that for everyone to be able to get as much as they can out of the studies. So to me it's a simple respect where people are at and also respect the teachings. It's that simple. So thank you for bringing that up. I think it's really important.
Another question from California. How do alcohol and drugs, other drugs, influence the effect that mantras activate in us?
Well, if you want to know, you can just try. Remember that when it comes to recreational self-medication, right? Okay, there's a difference between using chemicals as tools in a spiritual practice, as you can find when it comes to plant medicine and other forms in traditions, right? It's a whole different thing when you try to numb yourself and when you try to self-medicate, which is the only reason anyone would use alcohol, right? And that is about becoming unconscious, right? All form of self-medication, no matter what it is, serves the purpose of making you less aware, to feel less because, life is too stressful, so you just want to, but it means that you become less aware to yourself and to the world. Not only that, you become more emotional, which means you buy even more into your subjective narratives, which is extremely harmful because it's the opposite. This is part of why it's working, especially with alcohol, because you agree that your emotional story is true and you can go into that bubble. So in trying to do that, or doing that, and then trying to expand your consciousness, while you're actively trying to do the opposite, that does not work. Right? So it does not mean that you can never drink alcohol, but try to not do it at the same time. And also, when working with me, try to look into your self-medication practices. It's not limited to drugs and alcohol. It can be food, it could be entertainment, it can be laziness, it can be like anything. It can be shopping, it can be like whatever you use to numb yourself. As I said, most people have many forms of self-medication going on at the same time because we're stressed out of our fucking minds. So the only way out of that is to wanting to be present, because when we are in stress, it's, no, I don't want to, I can't deal with that. Well, you cannot master anything and be in resistance to it at the same time. And say, this is too much, this is overwhelming, I don't know what to do. You need to do the opposite. So we learn to accept and to be present and to let go of our own judgment, let go of our own version. Because when you don't have your own subjective version, you can't feel stress, right? Because then there is no conflict. So you try to explore what is, instead of standing in your own position and your own stories and experiencing the stress, which is then, you know, the distance between these two positions. And then we need to self-medicate. So it's learning first to try to open up to objective reality as much as we can, and then we learn how to deal with it. So, if we just relax, say all people are today involved in self-medication practice, no matter like what it is. And again, drugs and sugar can basically work the same way. So it's not about how we do it. It's more like the intention behind it and the fact that we are doing it. And then see if we can grow slowly out of that and heal our need for that by growing into an acceptance for ourselves and for what life is about. But at least when it comes to alcohol and drugs, I would advise that try to lower that, at least not engage in these teachings while you're under the influence of something, because it's not productive, I said, because then you're aiming towards a state where you are numbed and where you don't want to be present, right? So it's that. Try to make a decision that I want to be present, I want to be aware, I want to expand my awareness, because that's how I get the full overview, right? That's how things will make sense. So then you have to make a decision if you want to move into a higher state where you can see how things operate, and through that logic and how you can grow into it, then will reduce your stress tremendously and grow out of your need for self-medication, right? That's the healthy way, but it doesn't happen overnight. So yes, I hope that answers your question.
Does this include psychoactive substances like LSD and mushrooms?
Again, the question is, does this include LSD, mushrooms? Again, when it comes to the use of anything, it depends on the intention. Recreational use of any substance will not lift your consciousness. It can then expand a low consciousness, meaning that you can still be very primitive, but it expands. It will not lift you. And this is like people who've been involved with kind of spiritual practices with substances. And when they then experience people doing it recreationally, they understand the difference. Because it's a very different thing. When you use a tool where you change the modality in your brain so that it stops you less and you're less attached to the constructed reality that your brain is producing. But then you aim and then you go for it and then you are disciplined to go to a higher state. So then the experience of the substance is not the goal. But understand that if you are not using it as a tool, if it's more recreational, you will stay in the same low consciousness, but it will be wider, right? So it's back to the intention. Everything can be a tool, right? To me, it's not interesting to create any kind of like moral rules about anything, because it's everything in existence can be used as tools if the intention is spiritual. But then we also need to understand in ourselves, what is a spiritual intention and what is just fluff. Often I see people today when they use different chemicals and plant medicine, they just want to get high, but they want to get permission to do that, and then they can turn it into something spiritual. It's still a recreational intention. And it's still just fluff. It's still self-medication. But they pretend it's something else. right? So the intention and the discipline around any kind of use when it comes to chemicals, to me, that is the big difference.
The usage of mantras as recreation. What's your position on that?
Sorry, the use of mantras? As recreation. I would say that is basically completely fucking stupid. Nobody does that. Because it doesn't work.
Can you define what you mean by recreation?
Recreation is trying to get away from life. It's part of the self-medication strategies where you just want to feel good, we want to get away from the stress, you want to get away from everything that is a problem. It's wanting not to deal with life and just get to a state where they have enough dopamine to feel good. That's the point of anything recreational, right? So it's wanting to go there, which is not dealing with your karma. That is the goal. And then, of course, you're not dealing with your karma, so you're not growing. Right? It takes discipline to always approach your karma and say, well, this is something I haven't learned yet. So let me study. And so, oh, this is so hard, I want to, you know. And this is what spiritual work is. It's never yielding. Always being present. When you approach and when something approaches you that causes a reaction in you, you say, well, obviously there's something I need to change in myself. What is that? How can I transform? So I can include this, but obviously I'm wrong. Obviously I'm not in a state where I'm able to be in harmony with this, so I need to change. How do I do that? How do I practice? How do I apply it so that it becomes permanent? Right? And that is what spiritual work is. It's never about feeling good.
What do you mean about presence?
Presence is something that you study for a very long time. Because it's like what is, kind of where we are present and who is being present and to what, right? It takes time to figure out because many of these things, it's impossible to explain. But I can over time bring someone there, not passively, but by holding their hand, by them doing the practice, they can move into that. But presence is beyond what you are, beyond your stories about yourself, beyond the self. So it's a way of being in existence, without identity, without definitions, and without the limitations of the self.
So it's basically like not having a phonological loop, but you're still experiencing everything visually, or?
No. Presence is a state where you have peeled away your own version so that what actually is become what you relate to.
Kate wonders if a new beginner can take Collection 5 as the
Absolutely,
course.
yes. These are just cycles. It's not like you have to start with one, it's just we group them. And also one of the reasons why things become more advanced is simply because there are people who have been studying me for a long time so that they can handle more. But it also means that they will be part of kind of holding the space for students, which makes it easier now to be part of this. Because you come into a space where there is kind of track record and experience among students, right? But then you have to go to work. It's, in a way, it's quite demanding. But normally when people approach me, it's because they're tired of the bullshit, especially their own. And they want to learn for real. They're prepared to do the work. They understand there are no shortcuts. They're done with that. And that's the attitude you need. And that's really all. The rest can be taught, the rest can be studied, but it's back to the intention. Right? This is not a course in kind of fluffy Western spirituality. This is the real deal. So you have to be the real deal. You have to show up to yourself. You have to be in a state of spiritual dedication for real. Many in the West have that in them, but it's just that our culture is so poor when it comes to spiritual focus and dedication that it's kind of difficult to build it. But you have to look inside, because as a spiritual being, it's the only thing you want. It's the only thing you're here for, is to unfold what you are spiritually. And you know it. So the dedication is first and foremost towards yourself, and honoring yourself, honoring your own evolution and your own complete journey as a soul. And begin to take your spiritual unfoldment kind of more seriously. And then understand, okay, well then, it's real work. So it's showing up to that and decide to be a true student, not someone who pretends to be. And as long as you are honest in your intentions, you really, really try to show up to yourself and, again, honor yourself as a spiritual being, the rest will fall into place. So yes, anyone can join. You don't need to have any previous experience with mantras, because you will not come to me unless you do have experience with mantras. Not from this lifetime, but you've definitely done it before. You will never be able to find me unless you have extensive experience. But remember, in your current human, you may not. It doesn't matter, because you will be connected to your greater journey. And over time, you will begin to download more of that inner wisdom and more of that experience. So, also be open to that part of it.
Okay, maybe a last question from David is, can these new mantras take you to different dimensions, or can their vibrations lift you into seeing from a different sense of time?
Yes, but that depends on you, right? Because again, it's not magic, right? If we take that out of the way, you are still you. And where you are, that's how far you've come. There is the only movement that truly exists is your own evolution. Just try to think about that for a moment. That is the only true movement. The rest is just fluff. So evolution is the only true movement, and that means also when it comes to your spiritual unfoldment, that's also evolution. So what you experience and where you're at in your journey, that is as far as you've come. Right? So, I say, if you're digging a tunnel through a mountain and you're halfway, this is as far as you've come. And yeah, you have to hack away, and then in one day you will move an inch. You say, will this transport me somewhere else? What's the point? This is where you're at. This is your journey. This is where you're going. The rest is simply phenomena. And phenomena feeds the ego. Oh, I want to say this, I want to experience that. Well, it's simply because we want confirmation. We want to feel special. We want all of that. It's just ego. And I've met so many people especially in Western spirituality, the focus on phenomena is interesting because we want to be entertained and we want to be confirmed. And we think that, ooh, if I experience this and, oh, I experienced this master here and blah, 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 it says something about me. I'm special, you know? And so many people, as you know, spirituality, they say, well, all of these beings, they come to me and ask me for help. It's just, you know, the ego never stops, and humans are like that. So I make it a point to never feed that. Most things that happen around a student, I make sure they don't see, because I don't want to feed that. Sometimes when students experience me either change things or that I'm kind of with them, sometimes I will kind of show myself if that makes sense from an educational point of view, not from the phenomenon-based point of view. Because often when that happens, there will be more, it will feed into the fantasy, the ego, the power games, all of that. We focus on rearranging someone's existence in their life so that they can grow more efficiently and be present to where they actually are at. But sure, when you expand, and even through the mantras, if it's something that you need, you may be shown things, because you will be able to stretch over time, like far beyond your humanness, and you will connect with who you are outside of this lifetime. You will connect with anything from past lives and like different dimensions and all that. But it becomes normal. It's not about the phenomenon, because reality is multidimensional. It's eternal. It's infinite. And when we start expanding beyond, you know, the type of reality that the human life form, the human culture relate to, everything is normal. So, yes, try to expand in every dimension, and you will definitely also connect with different beings, different types of consciousness and spaces and all of that. But it's then part of your actual expansion, right? So it's not about you as a person being lifted into a dimension and just, ooh, this is fine, you know. Why the fuck would anyone do that? It's a waste of their time, right? So many people come to me and also say that, oh, well, if you can only lift me to that consciousness, then I can be of use to the world. So no, you can't. If you would be able to utilize that, you would already be there. You have not built the structure, you've not built the discipline, you've not built, you know, the musculature, or the channel or the consciousness to be able to hold and carry and channel that. You're just a tourist, and it will, then you want me to use my time and energy to lift someone to a space where he doesn't belong, so he can have like a tourist experience and become big-headed, and like, what's the point in that? Nature does not operate that way. We only look at what is the exact point of evolution in detail, and then what does it take? How can we facilitate a better growth? How can we try to make sure that instead of repeating 100 times, maybe 50? You know, how can we streamline the process so the healing becomes more intelligent and that you actually learn something, right? This is what it's all about. And then being present to many variables of both dimension and existence becomes normal. And yes, all my students over time, they get a very flexible relationship with dimension and time and space and all of that. Because you begin to see past this. And you start to see the kind of plasticity of everything and how you can bend it and modify it, and see that when you change your consciousness, then the laws of nature will change with it. And you can begin to be more creative with it and all of that. But it's still not based on the phenomena. It's still just your reality changing because you are changing, which means you need a bigger canvas and more colors. So it's that. This is why my focus is to be a spiritual educator. The point is for you to be educated. And you don't educate someone by focusing on phenomena. Okay.
Unless
Now-
we have any other questions, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Do we have any other comments or questions?
no.
Okay, good. Now, working with mantras, I hope that you feel inspired and this will be interesting and fun. This may sound very serious and all that, but you know, we also try to emphasize like fun and the freedom and the exploration because it's really about you unfolding who you are and growing past who you think you are, because that's when everything gets fucked up, right? You are not who you think you are. You're a spiritual being in unfoldment, and it's letting that unfold. And it will give you more freedom and more sense of order. You will understand more how life works and how you work and how to grow and heal for real and to unpack the potentials, right? As so once you figure out how to stand on the surfing board, that's when surfing begins, right? And in the human culture, they never get past the trying to hold on to the board for dear life without drowning. That's how they see surfing, right? So that's what we think life is, and then it's a matter of not doing that. Getting to the level where you can surf, that's where all the fun is, right? And so that's where you get, again, this sense of freedom and creativity and self-expression. And it opens everything. So working with these teachings over time will open everything. You will be able to see and reach more and more potentials, express yourself in various ways, to go into different spaces in you and your life and discover that life is so rich and it's so nurturing and so supportive, because all life wants is for you to be everything that you are and that you haven't figured out yet. And this is what we're doing together. This is why we need each other. We need to mirror, we need to nurture and inspire, and also show others when we grow, when we transform, because we always get better. And this is also, when you look at, you know, many of the students, if you see them 5 years ago and see them now, you would understand what I mean. And that's also the thing, that many of the students have now, they have a track record, they can see their growth. They can see their change in intelligence and insight and consciousness and how they're able to be in life. And they're on a very different level than they used to. And that is also now becoming part of the community and the culture that we're building, because that's really what it's all about. It's the result. It's how we can become everything we know that we can be as a spiritual being. Right? And letting that unfold in our human journey, because we all know it, you know it's there. This is why you're here, because you know it's there and you just have to figure out how to unfold it. And that's what you will be doing. That's the results you will be getting over time. It will not happen in just a year. It will happen over the course of many, many years. But, you know, it's bringing you to the level of mastery. First, master yourself, master your own life, and then gradually that sense of mastery will expand beyond you. And mantras, and the mantras that we work with are surgical, precise keys that will optimize you, your consciousness, your life, so that when you are then in that intention of learning and studying, you will be able to kind of plow through karma like butter. So that's it for me. And then Andy will talk a little bit about the practical information, I think. Yeah, sure. can just sit here.
Okay. Everything you need to know about the Collection 5 of Mantra, IKYA Mantra, is at IKYA.org. So I'll be very brief. 10 mantras over a year. We accommodate the Norwegian holiday schedule, so it spreads out over a year. We have a couple of different payment options that you'll see on the website, and everything it happens on Tuesdays. It's every second Tuesday. There's one teaching per mantra from IKYA, and then one workshop with me and Maria and Elsa, students of IKYA. We lead the workshop to practice the mantra together. And then everything video and audio gets put out online so that you can watch or listen as many times as you want at ikyalearning.org. And so it's super easy on your phone or wherever you are. I think that's it. Oh, and we do also work on getting the text version of the teaching provided as well, so that you can study it more than just listen to it as well. Yes, does anybody have any questions about the practical stuff?
When does it start?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Starts on the 10th of October. That's a really important introductory evening because as IKYA keeps turning up the volume, we all need to focus in on how to get the most out of the course. So that evening, the 10th of October, is an intro teaching with IKYA, and then the first mantra itself is on the 24th of October. And then again, it runs through September of next year. Any other, yeah?
Does it have anything to say if you can be present physically on each workshop, or if you can only be online?
Yeah, so your question is whether being here physically is important or not. Of course, it's ideal if you can be, but we have students all over the world who attend online, and it works beautifully. And we've worked really hard to have good audio and video and stuff, so people experience it as really top-notch to also be online. And also, if you can't join live, then that's the advantage of having it recorded and we do post it immediately after the teachings. So it's really easy to catch up, and if you're busy one night. Anything else?
As
Yeah.
if you're as a couple, you could use one link, or you need to sort of respect.
As a couple, it's 2 students, so I mean, you'll probably end up using the same link, but it is 2 sign-ups for the course. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? No. Okay.
Then we're done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you guys
good.
so much, and hope to see you in 2 weeks.